I have two very simple questions for you. Is your podiatry business making the money that you feel it should be making for the amount of time you've been in podiatry? And are you having the time off with your family that you feel you deserve after all the time and effort you've put into your business? If you cannot answer yes to both of those questions, please go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, have a read through the coaching section and consider reaching out to me. I really look forward to talking to you and helping you where I can. Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast, a podcast designed to help you feel, see, and think differently about the podiatry profession. The title of today's episode is Toxic Bosses. Are you driving good people away? Now, I've been thinking about this topic for some time because I've heard a lot of stories from podiatrists over the years. Some were employees, some were owners. And interestingly, some were owners who eventually realized they had become the type of bosses they said that they would never work for themselves. But before I continue, I want to point out what this episode is not. It's not a rant about terrible bosses and sharing examples of what some terrible bosses have done in the past. Even though when this episode idea was originally pitched to me, it was from a couple of disgruntled employees who wanted to come on the podcast and vent about their previous employers. I totally understood their viewpoint, but my issue was, what will people take away from this episode if we actually went down that path? Other than some bosses can be toxic, which we are all aware of. So instead, I want this episode to go beyond some of the flaws and focus on helping business owners become better leaders. I believe most practice owners are not toxic people. I think most are good people under pressure who have never been taught how to actually lead properly. So this particular episode is not about naming and shaming anyone. In fact, I'm probably going to share more about my own flaws than anybody else. And it's not about pegging employees against employers. That's not what it's about at all. But what it is about, it's about leadership and becoming a better leader. And I look this way, if just one idea from this episode improves one workplace, then this topic was definitely worth discussing. So let's start by clarifying the term. What is a toxic boss? And I know that not every demanding boss is a toxic boss. For example, setting high standards is not toxic. Making team members accountable for their actions is not toxic. And having difficult conversations when they are definitely needed is not toxic. Toxicity has got more to do with behaviours, especially if they become destructive. So, for example, toxic behaviours could include constant criticism, public humiliation, playing favourites with team members, micromanaging everything, taking credit for success even when you have not earned it, blaming others when things fail and not taking that blame yourself when you know that it probably could be your fault, never admitting mistakes, poor communication is a huge one, unpredictable moods. I'm going to share an example in a sec of a boss that I had whose mood was up and down, didn't know which way it was actually going to go, and making staff afraid to speak. So here's a question to ask. What does it actually feel like to work for you? So stop and think about that. And I want to share a story. A friend of mine, Deb Johnson, who is my mindset coach, and she has been on the podcast a few times herself. And I brought her into my clinic once, got the whole team together, and we were doing a half-day training day. It's fantastic. We went through all this different stuff. But one of the things we had to do, we all had to pick one word, how we would describe each other that we worked with, which was very interesting. What I found fascinating, 2 podiatrists out of the 4 that were working for me at the time, the word that they used to describe me was intimidating. And I was initially taken back until they explained what they meant by it. And what they said was, it wasn't that I did anything that stood over them and was intimidating that way. It was more that because I set such high standards for how I treated my patients, how I adjusted an orthotic, even going down to how you put a cover on, how you cut it out. I was so pedantic sometimes about making sure things were done to the best you possibly could. They sometimes found trying to live up to the standards that I set very intimidating. But what it made me realise, I took that on board, and I really appreciated them saying that, is it made me pay more attention to my own actions. That when I was doing something, I took a little bit more time to explain how I did things. And I talked a little bit more about ways that I wanted things done. And over a period of time, I went back to the ones that said, do I still feel intimidating? And they went, oh yeah, but not as much. So I thought that was a positive. Next, I wanted to discuss why good people, I think, become bad bosses. One thing I know for sure, nobody teaches leadership at university when you learn podiatry. I know when I went through, there was no leadership subjects. Might be different now, but unlikely. Students will learn biomechanics, they'll learn surgery, they'll learn all about diabetes, dermatological problems, but none are taught leadership, communication, conflict resolution. No one is taught how to motivate themselves or how to motivate others. And there is definitely nothing taught around emotional intelligence. And owning a clinic doesn't magically make you a better leader or somehow just make you a leader. It doesn't happen. Of course, there are some people that naturally have leadership capabilities. And some people may have been influenced by family connections. They may have had close friends that they could learn some leadership from. It may be sport related. They could have been lucky enough to have a coach like Ted Lasso. If you have not watched the show Ted Lasso, I think it's on Apple TV, you need to watch it. It is a fantastic show. Or they may have just had an influential boss. Now, I had a number of part-time jobs when I was old enough to work, and I got to see both good and bad bosses in action. I remember one of my bosses at Big Rooster, which is now Red Rooster. And if you were talking and he walked into the room, whatever was in his hand, he would actually throw it at you. It didn't matter what was in his hand. He could have thrown a chicken leg, or it might have been a bag of frozen peas. You didn't know what it was going to be, but whatever was in his hand, if he walked into the room and you were talking, even though you were still working and getting the job done, he would immediately just throw stuff at you. He would get the shits so easily. He would sit in his office most of the time, and the only time he ever came out was to actually yell at us or to throw something at us. That was never the sort of boss that I wanted to be. And it didn't end well in the end. That's a different story altogether. But one of my most influential bosses was a guy by the name of Tony Harris. And he was the son of this place called Narang Park Poultry, which was a chicken farm where it was actually a chicken farm where they slaughtered the chickens. They didn't grow the chickens there. And this was my job that I had over the holidays when I was going through university. I did various jobs on the chook farm, but one of my jobs, or the job that I did when I turned up, was a job that nobody wanted to do. So when the chickens are all cleaned up, they go into this big vat of ice, which is probably about maybe 7 or 8 meters long. And all the chickens are going there, and they would churn through this vat of ice after a period of time. I can't remember how long it took from the time they went to come out. Maybe it was 20 minutes. And my job, I would sit at the end, and as the chickens came back out, I would pick them up, I would hook them on this, put them up on this hook, and then cut the chicken neck. And then they would go around this big conveyor belt, and then they would actually get packed. And like I said, when the chickens came out, also ice came out. So from my elbow down was dumped into ice, and I would hook these things up. So after about 15 minutes, I had no feeling in my hands. During summer, it actually wasn't too bad. Winter, it was terrible. It was so cold. It'd be like 5 degrees outside and like -1 inside. It was awful. Anyway, this one particular day, a chicken got stuck in the vat. All of a sudden, they said, whenever this happens, somebody has to dive down into the vat of icy water that's full of chicken blood, and they have to go in there, find where it's stuck, and they have to pull this chicken out. Now, because I already had probably the shittiest job in the place, everybody looked at me that I was going to be the person that had to go in there. And of course, they said, don't be concerned, Tyson. We tie a rope around your waist, and when you dive in, if you get stuck, just pull on the rope and we'll pull you out. Now, these days people do ice baths by choice. This was not by choice. Anyway, while everyone was looking at me, Tony Harris came walking down. He said, what's going on? Because he was the boss. And I remember when he came down and he asked everyone what's going on. And they told him, chicken's stuck there. And he goes, not a problem. Just ripped his shirt off, grabbed a bit of rope, tied it around his waist, and he just dove straight in there. Did not ask who was going to do it. Did not start pointing fingers saying, oh no, Tyson, you have to do it because you already have the shittiest job. Now this one's even worse. And he dove down. He was probably underwater, maybe 20, 30 seconds. Next thing, bang, he pulls out the chicken that was stuck. He climbs out. I mean, he is almost blue from how cold he was. They quickly wrapped a blanket around him and he walked off. And I sat there that day, I stood there that day, and I was so impressed because he could have quite easily sent me or anyone. There was about 30 people working in this factory. He could have sent any of us in there to do that. But he took his shirt off, shorts off, dove in there in his underwear, got this chicken out and got out. And I just like, my God, that was absolutely amazing. And I spoke to him about it afterwards. And he said, that is the worst possible job you want to do in this place. He said, I could never ask everybody else to do it. It's my business. I'm always prepared to do it if I'm here. And I took so much away from that, had so much respect for this guy. And all my way through uni, that's where I worked for the 4 years when I was there. And I just realised both the stories I just told are chicken stories, and my favourite team in the NRL is the Sydney Roosters. So figure that out. Maybe I've got a chicken thing. And I still actually enjoy eating chicken. I think I should move on from my chicken stories. No matter how good you think you are naturally, stress actually changes your behaviour. Stress could come from, it could be financial pressure, payroll, taxes. It could be difficult patients. It might be family pressures, long hours, which creates a lot of mental fatigue, or it could be shaft shortages and inability to actually find a podiatrist. Now, I've said this on the podcast before. I actually don't believe that that's true, that there's a shortage of podiatrists. I think there's an overabundance of very average jobs. Just let that sink in. But that conversation is for a different podcast. And we all know that stress creates shorter tempers and people become reactive instead of intentional, especially when they're stressed. Now, it may seem odd, but many business owners unconsciously repeat behaviours that they actually hated. For example, they might say, my old boss used to yell a lot, like I mentioned when I worked at Big Rooster, Red Rooster. My old boss never praised anybody. Or my old boss expected unpaid overtime, said I needed to be there early, stay late to get things done, but I was never remunerated for that extra work. And the list basically just goes on. Here's a key many people, I think, overlook. Without reflection, history repeats itself. Many practice owners unknowingly carry leadership habits from their previous employers into their own businesses. If they never stop to examine those habits, they can end up recreating the very workplace that they actually disliked. To give you an example, I've got a couple of scenarios here. First one, we'll look at communication. As an employee, you may feel that your boss never explained why decisions were made. You used to think, when I own a clinic, I'm going to keep everybody informed. Fast forward 5 years, you now get your own clinic, you're busy, you're stressed, and you're making decisions on the run. And then suddenly your team is saying, well, John and Mary never tell us anything about what's going on around here. Without knowing, you have become what actually used to frustrate you, but you didn't do it on purpose. It just happened. The second scenario is regarding praise. You may feel your previous boss only spoke to you when there was something wrong. And you promised yourself, I'll always recognize good work and I'll praise my team whenever I can. Then once you're in the deep end of business ownership, where your attention is also on payroll, paying your bills, taxes, maybe stock ordering, replacing equipment that's broken, rostering, managing staff shortages. And let's not forget the patient complaint about a team member running late or suddenly the air conditioner stopped working in your room. Who's it all come down on? It comes on you, the business owner. And because of that, your team rarely hears you come up to them and say, oh, great job, because you've got so many other things on your mind. And it's not because you're a bad person. It's just because you stop noticing with so many other things that are actually grabbing your attention. Now, this is where reflection is the circuit breaker. Reflection is asking questions like, why did I react that way? Am I leading the way I always intended to? And if not, why? Would I enjoy working for me? Once again, if not, what would you change if you did? And am I behaving out of habit or by choice? And a lot of people don't realize a lot of the things we do, actually majority of things we do day in, day out, we don't even think about it. We just do it. Without asking those questions, you are often running on autopilot and you're totally unaware of it. So without stopping to reflect on how you're leading, you slowly become the boss you and your work colleagues once complained about. The next thing I want to talk about is there's a silent cost of toxic leadership that most businesses or most business owners are totally unaware of. The first silent cost is staff leaving emotionally way before they leave physically. They stop suggesting ideas. They stop asking questions. They stop volunteering to help you in any way. They stop caring about the business and the patients. They stop staying behind to complete any task. They'll be there at 8:30 and they will leave exactly when it's time to leave. And they use their sick day entitlements. And it'll usually be on a Monday or a Friday so they can have a long weekend. And then months later, after they've been doing all this, then suddenly the hand goes up and they resign. But was it sudden? The physical aspect of resigning is usually not the beginning. It is the end of someone leaving, because emotionally they checked out months earlier, way before they ever handed in the resignation. The second silent cost is recruitment becomes harder. Good team members, they talk to the work colleagues and also to other people in the profession. And word spreads pretty fast. And I bet right now you could think of a few podiatrists that other people have spoken about in the past that are not good to work for. Potential employees will also ask around before they apply for a job. If you're not getting much response from your job ads at the moment, this could actually be the reason. And unfortunately, your culture becomes part of your reputation, but it can be fixed if you're prepared to put the time and effort in. Now, the third silent cost is patients notice. And patients observe things that go on in your clinic, whether you're aware of it or not. An unhappy reception team, they will notice that. Tense or secretive conversations, people talking softly. And then when the owner comes in, they all sort of disperse and walk away. They notice staff turnover, especially high staff turnover. This is when patients start saying, I'm seeing a new podiatrist again. In the end, they notice it results in inconsistent service. So your culture eventually reaches through to your patients, whether you're aware of it or not. And the final silent cost is the financial cost. Constantly replacing team members costs you money in advertising. It costs you in training. There's reduced productivity and lost patients, because every time a new person comes, potentially patients could leave. Plus, you need to spend time interviewing, and time is money. Sometimes the most expensive thing in a business, which is never shown on a profit and loss statement, is poor leadership. Now, I want to talk about the signs that you might actually be the problem. This may get a little bit uncomfortable, and if it does, that's great. That means we've touched a nerve and you can actually improve upon it. But ask yourself, do staff seem nervous when they're around you? Do conversations stop whenever you enter the room? Do people rarely disagree with you? And when was the last time someone challenged you on your ideas? Are team members getting together socially, outside of work, and you're not even invited? Now ask yourself, how often do you say thank you? How often do you say well done? How often do you say, wow, that's a great idea? Or even greet everyone in the morning with a big hello and a smile, versus why wasn't this done? Who's responsible for doing that? Who broke this? And then pointing out, no, that's not how we do it. That is wrong. If staff are continually leaving, ask yourself, what's the common denominator? And you might find it is actually you. Now, I don't know if you've ever done exit interviews, but they can be a game changer for some businesses. So if you're not sure what an exit interview is, when somebody leaves your clinic, you can ask them a list of questions about the business, about you as an owner, about other people they work with. Normally you get more honest answers if there's a third party that is actually doing the questions. And I have done this a few times for different clinics. And imagine if all your staff could anonymously rate you tomorrow. Would you want to read the actual results? Now, let's turn this around and put a bit of a positive spin on this episode, because I don't want this to be all doom and gloom. What are the characteristics of great bosses? This is the part that's important to know. If we've touched a nerve or anything, now you need to start paying attention. Great bosses listen. Great bosses coach, not just for the first 2 weeks when they were starting, but they are always there to help coach people through problems. They're there to help teach. Great bosses are trustworthy. They also offer encouragement. They challenge, but they do it with respect. They apologize if they make a mistake or if they upset somebody. And this is the biggest one. They stay consistent. So great bosses create what I call psychological safety. People feel comfortable when they're around. They feel comfortable to ask questions. They feel comfortable when something is stuffed up to actually admit that they made a mistake or they broke something. They'll just come and go, hey, I broke this. I am sorry. And they're also very comfortable with sharing ideas. And the best thing about sharing ideas without any consequence is the best innovation happens when people feel safe. I believe great bosses build future leaders. Instead of asking, how can I control everything? You should be asking yourself, how can I help this person grow? Just like I mentioned earlier about my boss, Tony Harris at Nerang Park Poultry. He taught me to never ask a team member to do something that you wouldn't actually do yourself. And this is why in my podiatry clinic, I didn't treat ulcers. I did not like treating ulcers. I used to tell my team, if nobody wants to treat ulcers, that's fine. We'll just tell people we don't do that sort of work and we'll refer it out. And there were certain periods of time then in my clinic where that's exactly what we did. But there were other times when I had someone come and work with us and they go, I love ulcers. And we're going, fantastic. If anybody rings up with it, that is all yours. Just be aware that if there's things you don't like doing, if you don't like doing home visits as a boss, then you can't ask your team to do home visits if you would never get in there and actually do it yourself. Only ask your team to do something that you would be prepared to do yourself. But I still think if there's something that's the dirtiest job of all, if you're the owner of the business and you're the boss, just go and do it yourself. Don't ask anybody else to do it. That's what Tony Harris taught me. So let's talk about 5 practical changes you could actually make tomorrow. Number 1, listen more. Don't interrupt. Just ask, what do you think? And then shut up and let them give you some feedback. The second thing is give more recognition. Praise effort, praise improvement, praise initiative. Don't wait for perfection because there is no such thing. The third thing is hold regular one-on-ones, not performance reviews. I'm talking about have real conversations with the people that work with you. Ask what's working, what's frustrating you, how can I help, and what do you need to make your job better? And then when you get all that information, follow through. If you ask these questions, get feedback, and you never do anything with it, everybody will know they were just hollow questions. So make sure you follow through with the feedback. Number 4, admit mistakes. One apology from a leader can rebuild enormous trust, especially if you've not done it previously. People respect humility. And number 5, ask one powerful question. What could I do that would make this workplace better? Then listen and do not defend yourself. If a change is suggested by a team member, accept it, write it down, and then say, thank you. I'm going to give that some serious thought, and then make sure, once again, you follow through. I've been doing recently some on-site training days where I go into podiatry practices, and we do these training days. They are so much fun. And the feedback I've got from the clinics when I've done these has gone through the roof. They said the morale with the team members has been absolutely fantastic. If you want to learn more about that, go to my website, tysonfranklin.com. Just click through the coaching section and you can learn a little bit more about it. But if you want to talk to me about it, we can just have a chat over Zoom and I can give you more details on what I can offer, whether we want to talk about leadership, communication, or we want to do a creativity day. They are actually one of my favorite things. So anyway, here's an important point about leadership. Leadership isn't about being liked. I know it might sound a bit tough, but it's about creating an environment where people can do their best work. It's creating an environment where people feel safe. You don't have to become everybody's best friend, but you should become someone that people respect. And here's my final thoughts. Imagine one of your staff members was asked this question. Would you recommend this clinic? Would you recommend this podiatry business as a great place to work? What do you think they would say? Would they hesitate? Would they smile? Or would they enthusiastically say, hell yeah, definitely, this is a fantastic place to work? If the answer isn't what you'd like it to be, don't see it as criticism. See it as an opportunity. Every practice owner, I think, has the ability to become a better leader. And leadership is a skill. It's not a personality trait. Because at the end of the day, people might join your practice because of the pay that you're offering. You might be offering more money than anywhere else. It could be the location. It may be the job opportunity. But they usually leave because of the person that they actually work for. So actually give that some thought. Okay, I hope you got something from this. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to me. Send me an email, tf@tysonfranklin.com or tyson@podiatrylegends.com. If you haven't checked out the podiatrylegends.com website, please go and do that. If you're enjoying this podcast, if you're enjoying these episodes, if you're enjoying these solo episodes, please leave a rating and review on whatever podcast platform you happen to be listening to this episode on. Okay, that's it for me this week. I want you to look after yourself, look after your family, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye for now. Okay, if you're still here, you are ready for this week's Easter egg. And what I want to talk about, and I didn't mention it in the podcast episode itself, is even employees should be showing leadership. And the reason you should be doing that and taking leadership within a practice is because business owners are looking for people to work with them who also show leadership skills. Because that means they can actually take some time off and they know their business is going to be very well looked after. And another thing, employees who show leadership get paid far more money. So if you want to get paid more for the effort that you're doing, then become better leaders. Now, I've also written this article called The Top 10 Things a Business Owner Must Do to Show True Leadership. If you would like a copy of that, I'm not putting this on my website anywhere. If you'd like a copy of that, please send me an email, tyson@podiatrylegends.com, and I will shoot a copy of this over to you as soon as possible. Okay, that's all I wanted to say, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.